our first talk is by Kathryn McKinley. She's going to talk about research being a social process. She's a co-organizer, as we introduced her earlier, and she works at Microsoft Research. I'll let her tell you the rest of her story.
All right. It's great to be here. We, all of us who are here today, all the professors and recent PhDs and older people, are here because we love working with PhD students, and you're the future of computer science. And when we say that, we mean that, because the community of programming languages, of computer science more broadly, is a human social process. You may be good at working at the computer on your own. You can't sit on a row by yourself. You must sit in one of these other seats because we're going to have an activity that requires interaction. So no sitting in a row by yourself as the latecomers come in. So what that means, so the purpose of this talk is to remind you of some of the things that happen in a social professional setting rather than in a social setting like a college. And so one of the things we're doing in this workshop also is like, we're not just computer scientists, we're people who have lives and we do other things. And the importance of mentorship, the reason I became a professor and a researcher at all is because I wanted to stay in Houston one summer and be with my boyfriend. And so I asked my professor, Don Johnson on the far left, if I could work for him. And it seems like there's a lot of feedback. Can you turn off the two mics? I think that's the problem. The other mic has to be turned off. Yeah? Where's the other one? Is it off now? All right, so that's better. I don't want to give everyone a headache right away. All right, so, and he said yes. And he didn't tell me immediately, but the day I got my PhD, I also got my PhD from Rice, he told me, the reason I chose you to work for me that summer was not because you were the best student or I thought you were brilliant, it's because you asked first, okay? And so sometimes just asking for what you need is a critical, important first step, all right? And I've been very fortunate to be able to combine a career I love with a great family life. And I have a husband who's not pictured there, but those are our three boys when they were young and adorable, and now they're teenagers and more challenging. But I still like that version of our life. And my first career choice, I was going to be a ballerina, and so I've come in a lot of different directions. And I tell you that, so here there's two interesting details about my life that now if we meet socially, you could ask me about my oldest son goes to Purdue and is an economics major, you could ask me about him, or if you also are interested in dance, you could talk to me about dance. All right, so the research village, unlike your parents, who you don't get to choose, you actually get to choose your research community. You both get to choose the topic, you get to choose your advisor, but you get to choose a bunch of other people too, all right? You get to choose collaborators. You can just pick anybody you'd like to collaborate and invite them. We're gonna have a networking activity, so everybody needs to sit in a row with other people. And so for the latecomers. So that village, we have senior people who are the program chairs, who decide if you get tenure or not, and then we have, if you're an academic, and then we have the people who do the real work, which is all of you, the grad students who are in the trenches, and our community doesn't function when everyone's not doing well. And so we're all dependent on each other, and as you start your research career, you need to understand that the person next to you, the PhD student next to you, might be your DARPA program manager someday, okay? Or they might be your colleague, or they might be on an awards committee. And if you were mean to them your whole life, that's bad on you, and now they can punish you. So you want to be an effective member of your community making positive things happen. So we're going to talk about that. So you need social skills, all right? You need verbal communication skills so people can understand your work and you can be part of the community. You need written communication skills because the record of your research is written down in your papers. And your papers should be, every paper should be as good as you can possibly make it, in my opinion. Happy, productive relationships with your advisor, your lab mates in your department, your research community, and even when things don't go perfectly, you can still have good, productive relationships, and I'll talk about that. So the most of this talk is the next 10 minutes is going to be about creating and sustaining research community relationships rather than these other social skills you need. But it's all related, all right? Because you can't have happy, productive networking and relationships if you don't have decent verbal communication skills. Because how else do you form relationships except for talking to people? Or I guess you can write good emails too, and we'll hear more about that later. All right, so networking is building and sustaining these professional relationships. And it's participating in a research community as a positive member of whatever role you're assigned. So it is not using people, and it is not a substitute for quality research, all right? You need to do the best research you can, and then it helps get your research known, it helps people understand exactly what you did, and it helps form new connections and get you new ideas. So, oh, you're all computer scientists, so you don't have social skills or not. Maybe some of you think that, but it's not true. And everybody in this room already has one thing in common. You like computer science. So you can always start with computer science. You don't have to talk about anything personal or anything you feel uncomfortable talking about because you can talk about nerd stuff. You can talk about computer science. And Steve at the airport, we were going into OOPSLA, and the guy, when you're going through immigration, they ask you what you're doing here, and the guy goes to Steve, "Oh, so you're an NERD." So you can be harassed even at immigration for your career. But networking is not a genetic skill, it's a research skill. All right? And the reason at a professional setting like this that you're trying to get to know people is because you want to know what research ideas and problems are interesting and important that people are thinking about right now. If you have a new problem that you're trying to work on, you want to meet the people who've worked on it in the past to make sure you've read the related work, or they might have some ideas on your problems that you haven't thought of before. And in order to meet the right people, you have to meet a lot of people. It's like speed dating, which we're going to do later. If you only meet one person at every conference you go to, or you only know one person in your department, your network is small, and so you haven't given yourself the opportunity to meet the right people. So you need to introduce yourself to a bunch of people, find the people you connect with and enjoy talking to, have research or other things in common, and then build a relationship with them. Every time you come to PLDI or POPL now, you want to reconnect with the people that you enjoyed talking to before, avoid the people that you didn't enjoy talking to, and build deeper relationships, all right? And then another way to meet people in less threatening circumstances is to volunteer. Be a student volunteer at a conference. Organize a reading group at your university. Organize a student-led lecture series when people are getting ready to give a conference talk. They practice there, and you go and you learn about different areas. So there are lots of ways to foster relationships both locally and when you go to conferences. All right, and so then the benefits of having a good social network in research are people know who you are, so then when they meet you, they have context about your research and they have something to talk about. So it's easier for people to talk to you if they know who you are. It makes your work known. So your research, people will read your research. And I felt like I'd really made it one year when people cited one of my papers incorrectly. I'm like, all right, so I'm now they don't even bother to read my paper, they just cite it. So that's bad. You should not do that. But it's the kind of thing is people know this work should be relevant and they should have read it. All right. Then it's a source of new research ideas because Sean tells me about her new project that she's working on in operating systems. And even though I work in programming languages, it's related to virtual machine runtimes. So that helps. And it gives you different slants on the old ideas and how these ideas across disciplines are related. So not just in your direct area. And then you can have new collaborators. And you need, when you go to grad school or get a job, you need letters of recommendation. So you need senior people who know your work, who are not just at your university. Some of the most powerful letters are people who haven't worked with you, but met you at a conference, watched you give a talk, and thought, oh, this work is really interesting, and enjoyed talking to you afterwards. And those letters are more powerful than your advisor, if they don't write you a good letter, that's bad. But also they have a self-interest in your success. So these external letters that aren't from someone who knows you, who has collaborated with you, are seen as more powerful. And the only way you're going to get those kinds of letters is at a conference. You meet somebody, they attended your talk, and you create a good impression. And so those are ways to get that conversation started. All right. So I'm going to talk about some obvious things you want to do. You want to introduce yourself to your peers, to established researchers in other areas, research junior to you, research senior to you. And you want to connect your connections. Oh, James is now working on testing, and I know Myung Kim, and she works on testing, so I should introduce them. All right. So I'm going to give you two examples of networking up and across. And one of the examples is Ben, and Ben is a great example as sustaining a professional relationship even when things didn't go perfectly. So when Ben came to the University of Texas, he was my PhD student, and we started working on a project together that he hated. And even when I suggested other projects, he didn't want to do them. He wanted to do more rigorous theoretical programming language work, whereas I work on more experimental and performance-oriented work. And so he decided to change advisors. But he did not let that one negative in our relationship affect the overall arch of our relationship. He kept meeting with me and using me as a mentor. And so when he said he didn't want to be my PhD student, I wasn't happy because he's great, and here he is today, invited to co-organize this workshop. That even when things don't go perfectly, you can continue a good relationship. And so I served on his PhD committee. I wrote a letter for him for his job. And then as he's been a young professor at Harvey Mudd, he's come to me for advice. And also his department chair asked me to write a letter for his tenure because now he is working on problems that I'm interested in. So it came around too. So that these connections and these connections, not everything has to go perfectly in the relationship all the way along. And I think Ben is a great example of saying he knows. He could have said, oh, I'm rejecting her as an advisor, and no, this is so negative that I don't want to keep meeting with her or talking with her, but he didn't let that happen, and I didn't view it so negatively that I said, oh, I want to break the relationship with Ben. And relationships, just like your spouse and your children, they go up and down. And so if you can get through, don't let one negative experience flavor the whole relationship is one of the morals of that story. All right, so Doug Berger is my colleague at Microsoft right now, and he's junior to me, although he's now higher ranked than me. And but he interviewed at the University of Massachusetts when I was a assistant or associate professor there. Maybe I'd just gotten tenure in that range. And I thought his work was really outstanding, and we gave him a job offer, but he chose to go to the University of Texas. And so even though he's junior to me, then I end up interviewing for a variety of reasons at the University of Texas, where I end up as a professor 2 years later. And he was instrumental in getting me hired there because in this relationship building, even though he's junior to me, he had a lot of influence on the hiring decisions at the University of Texas. And then similarly, when I decided that I wanted to try industrial research, he was already working. He had moved to Microsoft Research, and he was again instrumental in saying I was a good researcher and they should hire me. And so this is someone who's junior to me, who just was in the right place at the right time. And we, of course, while I was at the University of Texas, we collaborated on the TRIPS multi-million-dollar hardware software co-design project. And so we really enjoyed working together. So we were also close collaborators. So that's an example of networking up and down. From Ben's perspective, I'm the up, and more across with my peer. So when you go to a conference, the first thing people ask you is, what do you work on? And what's the most boring answer you can give? All right, silence is pretty boring, all right? But the other thing you can do is say, I work on programming languages. Every single person at this conference works on programming language. That's like a non-answer, okay? All right, so when someone asks me what I'm working on, right now I have 2 projects. I'm making data centers extremely more efficient, and I'm making it easier to program with estimates. So that's my first answer. And those are kind of boring answers too. Like, it's even better if I say, I'm interested in reining in tail latency on data centers, or I'm doing co-location. We have a new paper at ACT doing co-location with SMT, where we use SMT to execute batch jobs together with latency sensitive jobs. And the really exciting part is we don't degrade latency ever on the latency sensitive jobs. Do you want to hear more about it? All right. So that's a better hook that seems I understand a problem, I have an interesting solution, and you might want to talk to me. Okay. So the only thing you remember from today is when someone asks you what you're working on and you don't say programming languages, I'll be happy. All right. So when you go to a conference, who's going to be there and who do you want to talk to? Especially for a shy person, or when you're new to a research area and people don't know you, this is a great strategy. You can look at the program, read all the titles, figure out who's working on the areas you want. Now like when I was a student, you couldn't do this, but now you can. You can go see what they look like. Search on Google Images or Bing Images and find out what they look like. So when you see them, you can recognize them. And then read a paper, okay? There is nothing more flattering than having a junior researcher ask you an informed question because they have actually read your paper and want to talk about the technical contributions. We're all in research because we like doing and inventing stuff. And if people actually understand it and talk to you about it, you feel excited and thrilled. So that's what you should before you come to a conference, you should read at least 1 or 2 papers, even more if you're really excited. But that's what you should be doing on the air. Instead of playing Sudoku on the airplane on the way here, what you should be doing is reading a couple of the papers of the people you're about to meet and thinking of some questions you want to ask them, so you'll be prepared if you get that opportunity. And so you won't be like a star-struck, like here. When I met David Cook, who's the father of vectorizing compilers, I was so thrilled, and I said to him, I have read all your papers. I am so excited to meet you. And I made him blush. And then I retold this story to him recently, and he blushed again. All right. So what did I do wrong there? I don't want to make David Cook feel uncomfortable and blush. What I should have said is, oh, this paper that I've read with some details, are you still working on this? Is there something? So going to a technical detail or asking some specific question instead of just gushing that I'm so thrilled to meet him. Okay? You can feel that way, but it's better to ask them the person some actionable question. All right. And then what you're going to do today is, because everybody has a cell phone, and that's the way we keep track of our lives now, is when you meet, you're going to turn around and do a networking activity, and you're going to write the contact information in your phone. And every time you meet a person, you should write their contact information in the phone. So in 2 years, you can say, oh, that person at PLMW, Mike Hicks, was working on dynamic software updating, and now I'm working on dynamic software updating, and I need to send email to Mike Hicks, and he'll remember me because I met him. And was his name Mike Hawthorne, or was it Mike Hicks? Let me go look, and I can figure out his name because I wrote it down. All right, so have EQ. So if somebody's having a deeply personal, private conversation, don't interrupt it, all right? But you all have CS in common. Some of this I said already. We're a community of find the problems with every piece of research. When you're doing the networking activity, maybe you want to find the positive thing that you liked, or maybe just something you didn't understand to discuss, rather than saying, hey, you forgot about dense matrix codes. This won't work on them, and making the, like, what point does that serve? Or instead you can say, how do you generalize your approach on sparse matrix to dense matrix, or vice versa is the way it usually goes. So if the conversation lags, you can change the subject. You can say, okay, I'm worn out. I've talked to this person for 5 minutes. This is all my brain can handle right now with a new person. Say, it was really nice to meet you, shake their hand, and then go to the bathroom and recover. If you need to, right? Because it is exhausting to meet a bunch of new people, to connect and enjoy the activity. And so if you need a break, go take one and then get back at it. All right, and then follow up. If you found somebody who's working in an area, actually read their work, then send them an email, share your software and workloads, send your pointers to related work. I'm working on this, they'll forget, but you want them to read your work, then send them the pointers, send them the links. And then invite them to give a talk. If you really had a good time, invite them to your university to give a talk, or get your advisor to do that. Or next time you're in the city at your brother's wedding, which I've done, say, I'm going to be in Seattle, can I come talk to you? Because we have this research in common. All right, so you just get lucky sometimes, but you get lucky because you've met people and you're prepared. So I have one more anecdotal story about how this social process works. So my brother's wedding is in Seattle. I want a job at the University of Washington. I go and I give a talk to Craig Chamber and Susan Egger's compiler group, and I have a great time. But then the next year, when I'm actually on the job market, I interview there, so it helps me get the interview, but then I don't get an offer. They hired Brian Bershad, who had $1 million DARPA grant. I don't know why they didn't choose me. It's their mistake. But Susan thought, enjoyed meeting with me, and based on that experience, she invited me to be on the AlBassam program committee. All right. So then that's my first major, or one of my first major program committees. I do my job. I read all the papers ahead of time. I say smart things at the meeting. And Anant Agarwal is the reviewer of a paper I submit there. And he really likes this paper that I've submitted. He sits next to me at dinner on purpose, not because by accident, and talks to me. And then he's the next program chair of AlBassam, and he invites me to be on the committee again because of all these two things: the good work, the good conversation, and the good research that he read. And then I'm invited to be the program chair 4 years later. And I'll leave out all the other intermediate parts. And Susan is critical to getting that process started, even though she didn't give me a job offer. All right? So just because the outcome isn't perfect, again, like the relationship with Ben, doesn't mean that the importance of the relationship to keep it going and sustaining it. And Susan and I went to David Patterson's retirement party together just the other thing. But there can be some negative things. Like I went up and introduced myself one time to a guy whose paper I really liked. And he was very rude to me. And I felt like, okay, like maybe he's just a rude person. But I also felt I was culpable because I didn't start with, like, I really liked your talk or I really liked this work. I think this is an important topic, and then ask us actionable questions. So I felt like there were some things I could do to make a more positive reaction from this person who I thought was crabby and negative. So that's my advice. All right. So we have 25 minutes. So let's spend, is anybody want to ask some questions before we do our activity? No questions about networking? It's all obvious. Mary. What about those people who you've been friends with now for 35 years? That's longer than your husband. So Mary's a great example of mutual support and long-term relationship. You don't actually realize that the people who you go to grad school with, you form this close bond because you both have the ups and downs and this, I don't know, hazing, whatever it is. And you get a lot of time to talk about both why you're doing what you're doing, how you get research done and be successful in your career and be happy and successful in your life. You have a lot more time. And even more than college, my friends from grad school are still my friends. And Mary's I took one of my other grad school friends on my trip with me who got out of the computer science industry recently. That was fun. And other questions? that when you're, if you've been hateful and rude to people, they remember that, right? And you don't have to be that way. You can be the source of positive ideas, and even if you're being very critical of an idea, right? You can ask questions in a way that's not denigrating the person or the work, right? Obviously, if you've discovered some imperfection in this work, a problem that they haven't addressed that you think is important, you also think the ideas in the work are really important because you're intellectually engaged enough to make those determinations, all right? So you can speak with your colleagues very productively, even if you're not saying positive, like, this is great, perfect approach, right? When you're asking questions, you're usually pointing out things that they haven't addressed that you're interested in. Have you thought about this? Are you going to work on this next? And then offering yourself as to work, right? And saying, I want to work on dynamic software updating. I have a student who's made some progress on this. Would you like to collaborate? Because I think in the Java setting, it's much easier to do, and you've been working in the C setting. So there's all sorts of ways you can leverage problems with other people's work in a positive way to build either collaborations or just good intellectual discussion of what the important topics are and how to solve them, right? And okay, so you don't have a lot of power right now as a grad student, but I'm on a faculty committee, hiring committee 1 year. Here's a bunch of people who've applied. This person was an asshole to me at a conference. I don't want that person in my department, right? So I say, even though he's done great work, I don't think we should interview because we want to keep our collegial, nice atmosphere where people are productively criticizing each other in positive ways, right? And that's not always happening, but that's like one of the indicators of a highly functional department is you want people who are intellectually rigorous, but also reasonable human beings.